Hey everybody, this is Rachel. First of all, I want to say thank you to everybody who has watched my videos and to those who have liked and subscribed. I really appreciate it that you've been interested in some of the things that I've had to say. My last video was about Philip Schofield, so please check that out, as well as other videos I've made about Meghan Markle, Prince Harry, and Britney Spears. So today we're going to change topic again, and we're going to talk about three of my big interests, actually: celebrity trials, criminal law, and Scientology. Now, one thing about me is that I'm actually an attorney. So when I'm going to be talking about the legal stuff, I actually kind of know what I'm talking about, since I've been practicing about 13 years and I have been working in the criminal justice system. So I do know a few things. I am not licensed in California, so I cannot specifically talk about how California does things, but I certainly can talk a little bit about generalities in the law. So Danny Masterson yesterday was convicted of 2 rape charges, and the third charge that he was facing has been declared a mistrial because there was a hung jury on that. Danny Masterson was actually tried in the fall for the same rape charges, but there was a hung jury and a mistrial was declared on all of those, and the prosecution does have the right, when there is a mistrial, to seek re-prosecution, which they did. And he was retried just a few weeks ago. The trial was about 2 weeks long. And then the jury deliberated for 8 days, which is huge. Most juries do not take that long, at least in my experience. That definitely says that they were thinking very carefully about what they were saying, what they were doing, going over the evidences, which is what you want juries to do. That careful deliberation, I personally think, is what justice calls for, and what you would want if you're a criminal defendant, that somebody is legitimately looking over the evidence, really thinking about it, and really talking about it, as opposed to necessarily making a boom slap judgment on something. But the general train of thought is that the longer the deliberations go, the better it is for the defense, and the shorter deliberations go, the better it is for the prosecution. But I mean, in all reality, you can never know. We don't have insight on what goes on in the jury deliberation room. You never truly know what's happening until the verdict is read. And if some jurors do choose to go public and talk about what happened in the deliberations. So we don't know if, one of the jurors will come forward and do an interview. The judge did put a prohibition on the jurors getting paid for an interview for 90 days, but it doesn't mean that they can't talk about it for free. So I would be very curious to listen to what they have to say. So right now, Danny Masterson, and for those of you who don't know who he is an actor, and his biggest claim to fame was That 70s Show, which was a hugely popular Fox sitcom in the late 90s, early 2000s. And I was a huge fan of it. I never missed it. I loved it. I thought it was so funny. I particularly liked his character. I liked kind of the snark that Hyde brought. I loved it. And I'm not the only one. It was incredibly popular. And in fact, it was so popular that obviously Netflix brought back and did a kind of sequel of sorts, That 90s Show. So the show has legs. And it also, created some pretty big stars out of it. We've got Topher Grace, Laura Prepon, Mila Kunis, Ashton Kutcher. So, whoever casted that show made some really good choices. Let me put it that way. So Danny Masterson is currently sitting in LA County Jail. He was taken into custody immediately upon conviction, and that is not unusual. Most people who are convicted go into incarceration right away if it's a major felony. Sometimes if it's, a misdemeanor, they may not, or if it's a juvenile, they may not. But for major felonies like that, 9 times out of 10, they are going to be incarcerated because there's concerns of flight risks. There's concerns of self-harm. So they really try to, put people in incarceration right away, and because they're no longer alleged anymore. It's been proven beyond a reasonable doubt by the prosecution team and, of course, determined by the jurors. And this is going to be a huge change of pace for him because he has lived a life of privilege being a celebrity. Right now, he is facing 15 to life on both charges. And the court does have the ability to run the sentencing consecutive, which means back to back, which would mean you would serve at a minimum 15 years, and then you would start the next 15 years on your next charge. Or they can run them concurrently, which means the 15 and 15 are on top of each other and go together. And the judge has the discretion in terms of what to do. So he could be looking at a minimum of 15 years on top of, 30 years on top of life. And so he is 47 years old, which basically means that he is going to be incarcerated probably for the rest of his life. Even if it was just 30 years, he wouldn't get out until he was 77 years old. And that is very old. I think the average lifespan of the regular male is like 76 years old. So, that is definitely towards the end of your life. But of course, obviously, if he's given more time, he may die in prison. And that is massive. So the next part of this is the Scientology element here. Scientology ran through this case big time. So the women involved that made these allegations, now these are two of them, they're no longer allegations. One is still allegations. But they were Scientologists. And Scientology allegedly had a rule that you couldn't go to the police if something happened, that you needed to go to the church, and that the church would sort it out and they would go through their own discipline system to handle whatever was going on. And these women were saying that they were discouraged from going to the police. That's why it took so long. I don't believe they actually went to the police. I think somebody went, I believe, in like 2007, and then somebody went again in like 2017. So these have been kicking around for a very, very long time because of the influence of Scientology. Now, Danny Masterson is a Scientologist. He is what is called a second-generation Scientologist, which means that he was basically born into the religion. His parents joined, and, he grew up in it, which is, not wholly unusual that if you're born into a religion, you're going to follow it. And I think, as many of us know, Scientology is very big in the celebrity world. It's not as big as it used to be, but they've always kind of catered to the celebrities. And that was part of L. Ron Hubbard's game plan, was in order to spread Scientology is to get celebrities in it, because, people do watch celebrities. They're interested in what's going on. They follow them. They want to know what's happening. What are you interested in? And so L. Ron Hubbard was kind of like, look, if we can get all these famous people in it, it's going to help spread the word. People are going to join because people effectively are sheep, and they're going to do what a famous celebrity is doing. So, I've always personally been very, very interested in Scientology. I remember as a kid, my mom would buy the Inquirer and the Star and stuff like that. And there were major articles written about Scientology even back then. And I'm talking, the 80s and the 90s. And of course, I grew up, loving John Travolta, loving Tom Cruise. I mean, I thought that his marriage with Nicole Kidman was the best thing going. And I was like obsessed with them when I was a teenager. I thought they were just like the perfect couple. So I was always very interested in their involvement in Scientology. And I really got interested in Scientology in the mid-2000s. Well, I guess maybe the 2010s, I should say. The 2010s is when I really became more curious about it, because that's when a lot of the books and movies, documentaries about Scientology were coming out. Like, I've watched Going Clear, the Louis Theroux documentary. I've listened to Joe Rogan's podcast with Leah Remini, with Ron Miscavige, the leader, David Miscavige's father. I've read Leah Remini's book. listened to many interviews with Mike Rinder. I follow Growing Up in Scientology, which is hosted by Aaron Smith-Levin, and they talk about the different things that Scientology has alleged to have done, the way they treat their parishioners, just the various different things, their personal experiences within Scientology. And I'm really reluctant to call it a church like I want to, but I as I said before, I don't really believe that it's a religion. I think that it's a destructive cult that hurts people. I really haven't had too much experience personally with Scientology. I remember I was in LA for a conference probably about 10 years ago now, and it was during Christmas time, and I was down Hollywood Boulevard with some friends that I knew from law school that lived in LA. So we're walking around, checking things out, getting to catch up with them. And I noticed this big display that had this Christmas display. It was really cool. It had like these enormous gift boxes set up, fake snow, Christmas trees. Like, it looked really nice. And it was kind of one of those setups where you could go get your picture taken, things like that. And I was on the side of the street where it was, and I was looking around, and I looked up and I realized that it was the Scientology Celebrity Center right there on Hollywood Boulevard that had this enormous display out front. And there was a young man kind of out front, with flyers trying to get people to come in to have their picture taken or possibly do one of their personality tests. I don't know. And I remember looking at him, and this young man, he was probably in his early 20s, had these wide, like crazy eyes, and it kind of scared me, to be quite honest with you. It tripped me out that this is how this young man looked, especially something that should be kind of fun and jolly, like a holiday display. And it just kind of, even just looking at him, really rubbed me the wrong way. I just felt like this weird energy from him that I couldn't really explain. And it just totally turned me off. And it made me kind of wonder, are some of these things true? And, obviously I didn't talk to him or anything like that, but just this energy and this vibe from him just really made me very uncomfortable. And I've been, again, like following all these things with Scientology for years. And probably right around that same time, I was in St. Louis with an ex-boyfriend of mine, and we were driving through town, and we happened to have passed a church of Scientology that was having an open house. And I desperately wanted to go. I'm like, please pull in. I just want to see what it's like, because I was just so curious. And he was like, absolutely not, and kept driving, which was probably the right decision that he's made. And my current boyfriend and I, we've actually talked about going to a Scientology center not too far away from where we live, just kind of out of curiosity. They run these like weekend seminars, and I've kind of wanted to go out of sheer curiosity, because you hear so much, and I just want to see what it's like for myself, so I can kind of evaluate it a little bit more. But I've never done that. I still kind of want to, though, again, just out of sheer curiosity, but it hasn't worked out. But Scientology also too apparently kind of went on a path of trying to intimidate these women who had come forward, intimidate other witnesses that had come forward. In fact, there's an allegation that Lisa Marie Presley was involved in this in terms of trying to find out what was going on, that she was told to report back to David Miscavige what she had learned, because apparently she was friends with one of these women who was involved in this whole situation. So, if that's true, if there was colluding, if there was witness intimidation, that's a really big deal. And right now there is actually going to be an evidentiary hearing set up because apparently the attorney for Scientology, who is representing them in a civil trial that some of the women have filed, somehow got her hands on what would be considered confidential discovery that the prosecution team had. And through the civil trial, that is unacceptable. They should not have just been handed that. They would have needed to have maybe filed a FOIA request. Maybe they would have needed to have filed motions in court to formally get their hands on some of the criminal stuff, some of the evidence, in order to see it. Because that way it might be permissible to get some of the documents that they were requesting, because it is relevant to the civil trial. But somehow they magically got their hands on it. And that's just not permissible, because in the criminal trial, the only people that should have discovery should be the prosecution team and the defense team for that particular case. So now they're going to be looking into how Scientology got their hands on this particular evidence. So I'm definitely going to be watching that. I think that's coming up in a couple weeks. It was supposed to be yesterday, but the judge made the decision to not go forward with that because she didn't want it to have any kind of impact with the jury still being out or coming back. So it got pushed out. So there's a slight reprieve on that matter, but it seems to me as though this judge is not happy with Scientology and is taking this very seriously, which is good to see. From everything I've heard, I've watched several other videos of court watchers that have all said the same thing, that Judge Olamide has been really fabulous and has really handled everything perfectly, which I think is wonderful. And that's what should happen. We should always have judges that behave in that manner. Unfortunately, we don't always, but most judges really do take their job seriously and really do care about the decorum of court, care about having correct and just verdicts, no matter what the case is. So this definitely could have big implications for Scientology. And right now there is a grand jury investigation on obstruction of justice in this case. So it certainly could put some of the leadership of Scientology in some hot water. And I certainly encourage all of you to check out Growing Up in Scientology. Aaron Smith-Levin, he is a former Scientologist. He really digs deep and really talks about Scientology and the different cases floating around, because this is personal to him. He was in the church for a long time, and so he really knows what he's talking about and is very smart, very passionate about it. So please check that out. I'm just giving you the Cliff Notes version. He really deep dives into everything, and I love his channel. He's amazing. But anyway, so this is going to have some big ramifications for Scientology. And of course, Danny Masterson is incarcerated, and it looks like he's going away for a long, long time. So I'm definitely going to keep my eye on this as well, continue to talk about it, give a little bit of a legal perspective on things as well, just outside of my box of pop culture interest. So thanks so much for listening, and I hope to see you again. Thanks. Bye.